Hello and welcome. On this episode, what I've done is I've asked ChatGPT for 3 trending topics in health and fitness today. And I've got the 3 topics right here, but what I want to do is I want to keep you up to date with what's going on so that you don't have to scroll social media for hours to try and figure it out. But I also want to give you some insights and some things that maybe you want to implement into your life to make yourself more healthful and just in better shape overall as you move through your life. Because I believe that the health and the fitness of your body is the most important asset that you have. And anything that you can do to promote that or to make that better, of course, is going to give you a better life. So without further ado, let's talk about these 3 topics that ChatGPT has given me. So number 1 is intermittent fasting. So apparently people have been talking quite a bit about intermittent fasting. And if you know anything about intermittent fasting, it's really just taking a period of time in your day or week or month, depending on how you structure this thing, where you don't eat any food. And then there's a certain period of time where you do eat food. Now, there's 2 kind of ways to do this. There's intermittent fasting, which generally is like 1 day off, 1 day on, or 3 days off, 3 days on, or maybe even a week on, or every month you take a week without eating. There's lots of different protocols and ways you can approach this. Time-restricted eating is something that I find more people kind of lean into, and it's done more by the hour. So if you've ever heard like a 16-8 protocol, it would just mean that 16 out of the 24 hours of your day, you're not eating anything. 8 hours, you have sort of this window where you can eat, depending on whatever your diet is, you can eat during that 8-hour window. So I think the big question becomes like, what is the right thing to do, right? Isn't that what we're all trying to really kind of figure out? And science, as far as I know, has not figured out the perfect protocol for anyone. But I do think we have some interesting clues to look at as to maybe what would be beneficial for you. And if you're someone who is overweight or obese, then I think you can do longer duration fasts, right? So a longer duration fast would be something like either 24 hours or beyond. At least in my mind, that's what I consider to be a longer duration fast. If you're someone who's just got a little bit of extra weight hanging around, if you're not diabetic, then I think it's important to maybe keep those a little bit smaller. So you could do some more time-restricted eating as opposed to just taking full days. And time-restricted eating, the most popular one right now, and probably the most researched one, is what's called a 16-8. A 16-8 is where you take 16 hours of a 24-hour period of time and you don't eat. And then you have an 8-hour window out of those 24 hours where you do eat. So again, 16 hours, no food, 8 hours, you get to eat. So if you follow that, that's what most, I would say, health professionals, health nerds, all the gurus, a lot of folks follow that 16-8 protocol. I would consider myself to be kind of a 16-8 person. I've been doing that for many, many years. I'm not super strict with it, but if you had to just sort of look at my average days over the course of the last probably 5-7 years, that's really kind of what I've found to work really, really well. And then another question becomes, should you do this in the morning? Should you, wait to eat until afternoon, or should you do it later at night? Again, I think it depends on the person. Initially, whenever I'm talking with someone about intermittent fasting or time-restricted eating, I think it's better to figure out what serves you best or how you feel your best. Because I know some people who just love eating breakfast. It energizes them, it makes them feel good, and they just need something in the morning. And I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that. So if you're that kind of person, then I would say go ahead and eat in the morning, but then stop a little bit later at night, right? Or if you're someone who really doesn't like breakfast, like me, like I don't really even enjoy it, then you could, push your first meal off through that morning and then stop eating later at night. So I think initially it's important to maybe lean into something like this. I think there's a lot of health benefits. There's obviously some sort of a weight loss benefit here, but I think you have to find what's going to work best for you. And even being a little bit careful of not just jumping into this thing full bore. So for example, if you're used to eating 16 hours a day, where you really don't limit yourself at all, maybe don't go to an 8-hour window, maybe just move to a 12-hour window and sort of adapt to that and kind of ease yourself into this. If you're someone who's got a lot of extra weight, you might want to just go, 1 day and see how that feels. and I'm going to guess it's probably not going to feel very good, but I think there's going to be some value there. If we can get your physiology to shift away from just burning all that food from your gut as energy, generally in carbohydrate form, and we can get you to start utilizing some of that stored fat, I think there's a lot of value there. There's a lot of benefit there. So I love fasting. I've been doing it for a very long time. I think it's always important to ask your healthcare provider. Full disclosure here, I'm not a doctor, but I think there is good enough research out there to know that there is definitely some value there from a health standpoint. But again, the question becomes like, what is the perfect protocol? All right, number 2, we've got gut health. So it looks like everyone is interested in gut health. I think this has been a conversation actually for a very, very long time. Looking at the gut microbiome, you hear a lot of people talking about that. Probiotics, prebiotics. There's all kinds of different things, that we can dig into, and we can go pretty deep into gut health. Now, I'm not a gut health expert by any means, but I'll give you my sort of thoughts on this. The microbiome is very complicated and very complex, right? Your gut has all kinds of different bacteria in it, which have all different kinds of functions. Primarily, it's to digest the food and to secure some of the resources of that food and help to get them through the gut wall into your bloodstream so that your body can use them, right? So you need this bacteria. And the thinking is, if your gut bacteria is quote unquote off, then you struggle with digestion and you might struggle with some malnutrition type things, right? If you're not absorbing a certain nutrient properly, that could lead to some poor health outcomes. But here's the thing with the gut microbiome is I don't think, at least not from my research, nobody has figured out what the perfect gut microbiome is, right? We've got a lot of these prebiotics and stuff or probiotics, which sort of makes sense, but we don't know what the best things are for everybody out there. And you can change your gut microbiome meal by meal just based on what you eat. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty here, and I think it's really easy to get really stuck in the weeds on this stuff and to obsess over a lot of like probiotic, prebiotic stuff. But I think the research is very limited. I think it's just such a complicated thing that we haven't quite figured it all out yet. So I don't even really want to speak on it too much. Many, many years ago, I had a microbiome test done. So it was like a stool sample. You take a swab. It wasn't fun. And then you send it in. And I got this whole report. And then I found out later on, like about a year or two later, that this company was completely fraudulent and went out of business. So they were basically stealing money and kind of lying. I'm not even sure if they were actually doing the tests. So it's always been in my mind, it's always been a little bit questionable. Just because, again, I think it's just so complicated. So we'll kind of leave gut health at that. I think there's a lot to be said for it. I think it's very important. But look, if you want to have great gut health, eat real food. Like that's the best thing that you can do. Like eat meat, veggies, nuts, seeds, and fruit. Try to avoid a lot of the processed, refined stuff that's out there where, there's just tons of sugar and which can grow bad bacteria. I mean, there's at the end of the day, when you eat healthy foods, your body becomes more healthful. And I think you don't have to worry about the gut. And that's kind of what I've done. I've just sort of opted out of this whole chaotic mess of gut health by just eating quality foods. Eat high quality foods. Rely on Mother Nature because Mother Nature has your back. And if you can do that, you don't have to worry about some of this stuff. All right. All right. So lastly, we've got DNA testing for health. Now, this has been kind of a cool thing recently. When I say recently, I'm going to say last 5 to 10 years. You can actually we can get a DNA test on you and we can see what things you might be susceptible to in terms of your health and well-being. Right. So the more time that goes on, the more data we get and the more interesting this data becomes. But there's this thinking around DNA where just because your DNA says you're susceptible to some things doesn't mean that you're certainly going to get it, right? Like you could see a gene that might be indicative of high blood pressure, but it doesn't mean that you're going to have high blood pressure. Now, there are some genes that 100% definitively say things. So I think it's really interesting. I think it's good to have your DNA tested. I've had mine done, and there's lots of different ways that you can run that data. Once you have your DNA looked at, you can get a raw data file, and you can send that through different online programs to get the latest and greatest information. So I use a website called foundmyfitness.com. It's run by a tremendous health professional. Her name is... I'm blanking on it. Dr. Rhonda Patrick. amazing. You pay like $20, you get your data file and you run it through her system, and it gives you all the latest and greatest stuff. So you can get a good glimpse into what your DNA is saying about your health. And if there are some things that we know for sure that we need to address, then that gives you the proper tool to start chasing some of those things down. And I'll just give you an example. Like for me, I found out that I have this MTHFR gene. So I don't methylate vitamin B very well. So I have to take a methylated form of vitamins in order for me to be able to absorb those things. And turns out like it works really well because I was low in my vitamin B when I had a medical test done, and then I got on methylated B vitamins, and now I'm off the charts. So clearly there's something to it, and it just gets better as the years go by. So I do recommend get your DNA test done and then get a hold of that raw data file. And then foundmyfitness.com, I think, is a tremendous resource that you can use to run that information through to get your, just see kind of where you're at on this whole journey. So there are my 3 things for today. Again, intermittent fasting, gut health, and the DNA testing. So if you have any questions, if you like what I'm doing here, comment below. If you've got some thoughts or maybe some things that I missed, comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all this stuff. And I hope you have a great, healthy day.